everyone, and welcome to November's edition of our cybersecurity awareness presentation. Welcome, everybody. And let me just introduce myself here. My name is Brian Powell. I'm actually the Chief Technology Officer here at PCA Technology Group. I'm also a certified ethical hacker, and basically all that really means is a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, I actually have the knowledge and capability of actually doing in order to kind of protect everybody from it. You kind of have to know what the bad guys are doing out there. So that's really all that means. So let's just go jump right into it. A few housekeeping items real quick here is that everybody's mic is muted. So if you do have questions as we go along here, you can feel free to drop those in chat. We do monitor that. So hopefully we can catch those as we go. If I do happen to miss them, then I can catch them at the end at the Q&A section. But I'll try to keep an eye on that for everybody, and then we can kind of answer questions on the fly if there are any. So why are we worried about cybersecurity? What's the whole point of this? Basically, it's to make sure that everyone realizes how serious this actually is and can be. There's a few logos on this page here that obviously show a bunch of different items and companies. Some of them might be familiar to you, some of them might not be, but these are companies that have recently been breached or hacked in some way, shape, or form. The one at the top there is actually a local company here. You might have just seen them in the news here. They got breached. Unfortunately, the breach is causing a whole bunch of layoffs. And it's here locally in Buffalo. The company, I think, is a German company, but they do have a facility here in, excuse me, Buffalo. And unfortunately, they were the recipient of a breach, and obviously you can see it's affecting some of their businesses and employees now at this point because they're doing some massive layoffs because of that breach. So why are we worried about cybersecurity? Obviously, it's not getting any better out there. Every time you turn on the news, open up the web, and look at a newspaper or something of that nature, you're seeing all kinds of breaches happening all over the place. And unfortunately, it's not getting any better. So what we're trying to do is to get the word out there and let people know that this is serious. And the whole thing behind it is to try to make you aware of what to look out for. What are some of the common tactics that are used by the bad guys, and how you can avoid falling for some of those common tactics. The other side of it too is obviously if you're one of those companies that is compliance required, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, or anything like that, DFS potentially, that you are definitely following some of those compliancy requirements. And if you have cybersecurity insurance, you will probably see a lot of this when it comes time. If you haven't already renewed it, you will probably see a lot of requirements when it comes time for that renewal, because they are really getting very strict on the requirements to have those policies and to give those policies, because they don't want to be losing money at this. It's not like it was before where, the breaches don't happen that often. Now it's happening all the time. So next slide here. So one thing to keep in mind is that if a bad guy does happen to breach your network or get into your system in one way, shape, or form, it's not like they send off all kinds of red alerts or alarm bells saying, haha, I got you, They're in there kind of looking around, figuring out what and who they got, what data is valuable. They might actually take that data offline and try to sell it on the dark web, or they may end up trying to encrypt your data and then ask for a ransomware. And basically what that is they basically lock your data to the point where you can't use it physically. And the only way you can get access to that data is one, if you have a very good backup, and they didn't happen to get to that, because a lot of times that's the first thing they do is they go and delete your backups, so you can't revert to those. But if you have a good backup, you can go back to that potentially. Or the other option is what they want you to do is to pay them X amount of money for some type of ransomware. And the issue there is a lot of times those fees have gotten extremely high at this point. So but unfortunately, that may be your only option. So the idea is that you definitely want to try to avoid this happening in the first place. And you can see here that the hackers are in your systems potentially up for 7 months before they actually make themselves known. And again, that statistic at the bottom there is the real meat behind this. Is that, you know, after a company has been potentially breached, especially on the small business side, a lot of those companies, 60% or higher, go out of business within the 6 months. So you can see how catastrophic these type of attacks can potentially be for companies. So a lot of times people ask me, okay, who's responsible for this then? You know, I get it, but who's responsible? You know, I'm only a worker, I'm only whatever. Unfortunately, you know, we want to try to change the mindset of who is ultimately responsible. While yes, it may not be your company, yes, you may not be signing the paychecks, yes, you may not be owning the company or whatever, but ultimately everybody that works for that company that sits in front of a computer is ultimately responsible for trying to stop this. It's not your IT, it's not your IT provider, it's not the owner, it's everybody. And the reason why that is because ultimately the bad guys know the easiest way into systems is through people. So they don't necessarily target the technology. They actually target individuals, like everybody on this call. So the more knowledge that you have, the better off everybody is, because ultimately what we like to call everybody at the end point is the human firewall aspect of it. And that's everybody that's pretty much listening to this call right now. And that's what we're going to be targeting. So we're going to show you how this is done and also how to avoid some of this in the first place. So how do they do this? So first of all, they do what's called social engineering. And basically what this is, it's manipulating people to get them to do what you want them to do. And it's extremely easy to do, actually. You know, it could be anything as the simplest form of doing this, or it could be more extravagant. The idea is that they tend to prey on folks that will try to get them inside the building. So ultimately, this could be done with phishing attacks, and we'll show you what that means. It could be done with a variety of different things, but 95% of the social engineering right now is done via email. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that and how they do that and how you can potentially avoid those pitfalls. As I mentioned just previously, that, you know, the most common attacks are email. It could be phishing, it could be spear phishing. We'll show you what exactly that means. Anybody that uses social media, whether it's personal or business side, and this isn't just your Facebooks and your Twitters and your Instagrams. This is also LinkedIn falls into this too. Those social media platforms, whether it's personal or business, are used for a lot of reconnaissance. I can get a lot of information about individuals off of social media sites, and it could be done through fake friends. It could be done through whatever, because it seems that everybody likes to post everything about themselves out there for the entire world. And whether you think about it or not, you're actually posting all that stuff out there for the whole world to see. So there's a lot of information to be harvested from that. Trends, you know, obviously I mentioned about ransomware, extortion's kind of the same thing, where they threaten you to post it on the dark web if you don't pay them X amount of money. Sometimes they do both. Sometimes they lock your data and they try to extort money out of you, so they try to get you on both sides. It depends. But who's behind this? A lot of times it's third world nations, you know, government and people that aren't very U.S. friendly realize that this is a very good business model, believe it or not. Because they pretty much get people in a very bad situation where they don't have many options but to potentially pay the ransom. And luckily, these criminals and hackers are ethical in the aspect that if you do end up paying them, they do, in all instances we've seen, they do give you the keys to unlock your data, you know, obviously, but if they didn't, that word would get out pretty quickly, and it would end up being a situation where people would just stop paying totally. You know, I know there's a fine line you got to walk there, but ideally, you want to try to avoid this in the first place. So, and again, we mentioned about the attack vectors. Most of the time, it's going to be on the web, via the web, when you're on the internet of some sort or another. Very rarely would it be physically on site unless you're being targeted locally by somebody. So just keep that in mind. So with that, let's look at web surfing. So, you know, we mentioned that most of these attacks do come via the web. So how can we avoid a lot of this stuff? Well, first of all, we want to try to keep web surfing limited to business use only. What I mean by that is that you want to stay away from non-business surfing as much as humanly possible. The reason why is because it keeps your attack vector much smaller than it would if you're just blindly surfing anything you want all over the place, doing research for your kid's science project or school project or whatever. You shouldn't be doing that at work. You should be doing that at home. And you definitely should not be doing it on a work resource, because if you go to a malicious site, obviously, and something happens to run on your work PC, you're infecting your work network. So you want to avoid that. As we mentioned, you want to try to stay away from social media as much as possible. Now, I know a lot of companies use that for advertising and marketing purposes. If that is somebody on this call, what I recommend is to try to do it in a more streamlined way, that you be careful about those kind of things. But you know, if you're not using that as business, you know, the idea is to keep off of all your social media platforms. You want to check your Facebook page or your whatever, or post your Facebook status and change that and do this. Do that on your own time while you're off the network, off your work network. Do that when you get home. Because again, there's this, you know, Facebook is riddled with all kinds of malicious things. A lot of times they have things that are malintended. An example is, you know, I'm sure everybody on this call who has a Facebook page has probably seen them post either from your friends or shared by somebody else that, oh, out of these 3 colors, tell me which one is your favorite. Well, guess what you're doing there? You're potentially giving away, if that's a malicious one, someone behind that is malicious, you're potentially giving away one of your password reset answers, because that one of those things is what's your favorite color. Another one's what's your favorite fruit, what's your first car. All those surveys that you're answering are giving me potentially, if I'm sending those out maliciously, you're giving me the answers to all of them. So if I'm targeting you physically, you're giving me the answers to those. So if I'm trying to break into your account, I have those potential answers, or at least it's making it much smaller for me to guess. So just keep that in mind, that, you know, what you're doing out there is not always private. Even if your settings are set that way, it's not necessarily always the case. So the other thing to keep in mind too is, you know, anyone that, obviously when you're on the internet, you want to make sure that your internet browser, whatever browser that may be, it could be Chrome, it could be Edge, could be Firefox, Safari if you're a Mac user. Make sure those browsers are kept up to date frequently, because I'll tell you, those browsers, all the browsers out there, are constantly getting updated. And if you're not physically updating yours, you could be opening yourself up to a potential security issue, where the bad guys could leverage any holes that are in that. So most of the browsers nowadays are pretty good about telling you when they're updating, or when they need an update. They'll either pop up a message saying, hey, you need to update, or there'll be a little update button up in one of the corners. Make sure you're replying those as frequently as possible when you see those, because again, they are blocking potential security exploits that the bad guys could leverage if you happen to go on a site that is trying to look for some of those. The other thing too that you want to be aware of is pop-ups. And what I mean by that is, you know, obviously those windows that pop up, and these are pretty much on sites that aren't legitimate sites. So what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of the local news, if you watch the news or whatever, look at the news sometimes, that you know, if you're on the Buffalo News, for instance, and you're reading an article, a business article or something, and you get halfway down the article and a window pops up saying, oh, to read the rest of this article, please subscribe now, or you've reached your maximum free, whatever it is. You know, those are legitimate pop-ups. But if you're on a site that you're not 100% sure of, and one of those windows pops up, obviously to close that window, you're going to probably either hit, if there's a close button at the bottom, you'll hit that, or you'll hit the X button at the top right-hand corner usually. And the bad guys know you're going to click on that. So again, this is a form of social engineering. So if that is a malicious pop-up, what they're going to do is they're going to put a window underneath that window that you're seeing. It's called a pop under. And what happens is when you click on one of those two areas to close out the one that you think you're closing out, you're actually clicking on something behind that could be downloading something in the background without you even realizing it. So they try to trick you. And again, that's the whole point behind this, is that if you stay off those sites that during business, that hopefully you'll avoid these type of things. But if you do find yourself in one of those situations, a lot of the new browsers nowadays do have pop-up blockers in them. So hopefully that pop-up blocker will eventually will stop a lot of those things from happening. But in the event that you do get one and you're not 100% sure about it and you're worried about clicking on it to close it, you could hit Control W on your keyboard, and this works on Macs and Windows. It works on Linux too, if anybody's using Linux by chance. And that will close down the browser window with focus. And a lot of times that will be that pop-up window. If that doesn't work, what you can do is also hit Alt F4 on your keyboard. That will actually close down the entire browser. So that will keep you from having to click on any of those two areas to potentially get avoid that potential trick that they try to do. Now, I do have people that sometimes ask me, well, what about my cell phone? I'll be honest, I don't do a lot of surfing on my cell phone. One, because it's really small and it's not very convenient for me to do it. And two, it's very hard to see things and click on things. So what I recommend there is, and unfortunately, there's no easy method to closing out things on that besides ending the application task. And that is different across all bunch of different phones and stuff. So there's no clear-cut way of doing it on there. So I can't really give you that information. But familiarize yourself with at least trying to end the application task. Usually it's in your settings somewhere or something like that you can go in and actually end the application, where it will close that down without you having to click on a pop-up window. So another tactic that the bad guys are using, and this is a fairly new one, is called a browser in the browser attack. And what they're doing is they're leveraging a few different things here. One is obviously they're trying to social engineer you, and two, they're leveraging the fact that people don't like to remember passwords. So what they do is they tend to log into other websites using a login that they're already familiar with. In this case, it's leveraging single sign-on, which is what SSO stands for. And basically what it does is it's leveraging either your Microsoft account, your Facebook account, maybe your Apple account, your Google account, Discord, and there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. But you can see in the screenshot here that, when you're logging in this case, you're trying to log into, it looks like Canva here. It's asking you, oh, do you want to continue with your Apple? Do you want to continue with, in this case, it was Google there because it's coming up with that screen, or do you want to continue with Facebook? What I would recommend is personally, to keep things consistent, you should probably continue with your email and set up a completely separate password for this site, just so you are not falling for this tactic. But if you do happen to use one of these single sign-on methods, in this case it's Google, what you want to do is you got to be very, very careful. And I'll show you what to look for here in a second. But the bad guys are setting up fake versions of this, and what they do is they get you to click in here and put in your username, which is your email address, and then you actually type in your password too, and it actually emails it to the bad guys. So you're giving your login credentials away basically without even realizing it. And the other thing is that it's extremely easy to fall for and difficult to detect. But I'll show you how to potentially avoid this if you do use single sign-on. So just to show you an example of this, this is a Facebook example. So if you're going to use Facebook as your single sign-on to another site, it's going to come up like this. And you can see on the left-hand side here that says phishing. This is the actual bad version of this. This is the version that's going to steal your credentials. And on the right side is actually the real version of this. And you can look at this all day long. This is going to look exactly like the real version. Even the padlock is on both of them. It equals out. If you happen to click on that padlock, it's going to say it's Facebook. The URLs are the exact same thing. So if you look at that, it says facebook.com. It has the exact same URL as the real one does. It is extremely, extremely difficult to detect. But if you happen to put your email and password in this one here and you hit login, it's going to send that information to the bad guys. So again, if you're on a site that's asking for this, you got to be very, very careful about what you're typing in and using that potential single sign-on. Here's another version of it. This one here is from Google. Exact same thing. Now, the only difference here, this does happen to have one single difference. On the fake one, it has create account. On the real one, it doesn't. I think it's just a fluke, honestly. But everything else, again, the padlocks, if you click on them, it's going to say Google. The URLs are the exact same thing across the board, everything. So it's definitely something that you need to be careful of. The only time I would suggest using single sign-on is if it's a site that you know is absolutely legit. The other thing that you can do, and there is a way to tell whether it's a real version or whether it isn't a real version. So if you do happen to get one of these windows and you're not 100% sure whether it's a real one or whether it's a fake one, what you can do is you can actually grab the top toolbar here of this window that pops up. And if you click on it and try to move it outside of your browser window, so you would just basically drag that outside of the window, if it actually opens up in a screen in of itself, that tells you it's the real one because it was able to escape out of that browser window. If you try to drag that and it doesn't leave that browser window, it's probably one that's trying to steal your information, because the way these are set up, it's using some special coding that won't let you drag that outside of the window. So the fake one won't let you drag it outside the window. The new one will. It'll just open it up in itself outside of the browser in a different separate browser window. So that is one way of being able to tell whether it's the real one or not. So if you ever have any questions, just grab that top toolbar, click on it, and try to drag it outside the window. If it drags out, it will obviously it's the new one. If it doesn't, then that is probably a fake version, and do not put your credentials in there. So moving on to email tips. Again, this is much like the web browsing piece of it. Don't utilize your work email for personal usage, especially with the holidays coming up. And then what I mean by that is, obviously Christmas is, whether you want to hear it or not, Christmas isn't that far away, and people start doing their shopping early. Don't do your Christmas shopping on your work email. Don't do that. You don't want to sign up for gym memberships with your work email. You don't want to sign up for non-work related book clubs or coupon clubs or whatever it might be. If it's not work related, do not use your work email. And the reason why I say that is because the tactics that the bad guys use are targeting folks with fake shipping notices, fake subscription things, fake coupons, fake invoices, fake payment things. And if you're not doing that in your work email, the minute you get one of those that show up into your inbox on your work email, you don't even have to open it. You can just delete it. If it says, oh, Amazon shipping notice, I don't buy anything in Amazon, I'm just deleting it. You don't even have to open it and try to potentially fall for anything that might be in that. Whereas if you are doing that, it's going to be real hard for you to tell whether it's real or whether it's not real. And you're going to have to open it. You might have to open up the attachment. And it gets real hairy when that stuff happens. So if you don't do this, it's much easier to detect those type of tactics. Now, if you do happen to use Amazon from a business side, maybe you buy some business supplies through Amazon, or maybe you buy parts or something from Amazon. You just have to be careful and keep an eye on what it is you're ordering and make sure that you're aware of, okay, you know what, I am expecting this or something like that. So just be aware of that. That'll definitely help you. The other thing too is, again, don't access your personal email while you're connected to the work network, whether it's on your work PC or whether it's on your cell phone. It's pretty much the same thing, that if you are opening that up in a web browser and you're looking at your personal email, if you click on something, guess what? You're on the work network, you're on your work PC. It's the same thing as if you were mixing your work email for personal usage, because you're opening that stuff up to work resources. If you're going to do that, obviously do it on your cell phone, and make sure you're using your data plan. That way you're not connected to any wireless network for the work area, and then you're also isolated from those type of potential attacks. Another recommendation that I like to say is to disable the reading pane. This is specific for Outlook users. Anybody that's using the preview pane, and basically that is the reading pane. It used to be called the preview pane, and that's this right section here that is showing the actual contents of the email. So what this does is basically it highlights that top message and shows you what that is. So it basically automatically opens up the email for you without you having to do anything. It's a convenience. Yes, it is for sure. However, this thing is automatically opening emails without you physically having to do anything. That's a problem, especially if there's something malicious in this email that is automatically opening up without you physically having to do anything. So what we recommend you do is to turn this off, and then you have to double click on these emails in order to open them up. And to do that, you go up to the view pane up top here that's highlighted, and then you should see reading pane here. If you hit that drop down arrow there, it will probably say, I think it says right, bottom, and off. You want to select off, and then this window will actually go away, and then you just have to double click on the email to physically open it up. Again, it gives you that visual test where you can look at the email before this thing is just automatically opening it up. It's much more secure that way. So here's an example of a phishing email, and this is a common one. So basically, it looks like it's coming from Microsoft Outlook, and it's basically saying that, hey, my password's expired. Do you want to click here, to either click on this link here that says change your password, or click on the one down below here that also says click below to change your password? What I recommend to everybody is that if you get emails with any type of embedded links in it, and it's not something that you were expecting or just initiated, never click on any links that are embedded in emails. What I want you to do is, if this is saying it's coming from Microsoft, so if this is real, what I want you to do is I want you to open up a brand new browser. I want you to go to Microsoft themselves. I'll go to Microsoft and log into their portal. That way, one, you are typing that URL in there into the browser. You're also putting in so you know you're getting to the right site, and two, any credentials that pop up will be on the right site as well. So what happens here is if you happen to click on one of these two things, again, this is a malicious email. It's made to look like it's coming from Microsoft. What it's going to do is this is going to send you to a website that looks just like Microsoft. And what it's going to do is going to ask you for your login and your password. You're going to put your login in there, you're going to put your password in there, and it is going to email it to the bad guys, and you effectively giving your email away. Again, they're trying to trick you into doing that. And this happens in one of two ways. They could send you in an endless loop that, every time you put your password in, they just keep saying, hey, it's wrong password, wrong password, wrong password, even though you're probably putting the right one in and it's emailing it to the bad guys. Real smart bad guys will actually let you do that once, and then they will redirect you to the real Microsoft site the second time. And that way, when you log in, it will actually work that time, and you won't even realize that you gave your password away the first time. So they do this in a couple of different ways. The smart ones will redirect you to the real site, and you'll just think you might have mistyped your password the first time and not even think twice about it. Meanwhile, the bad guys now have your login and can potentially be logging into your account without you even realizing it. So again, you get one of these emails, go to the website yourself, typing it in a brand new browser, and go that way. If this is real, the minute you try to log in there, it's going to say, hey, your password is expiring, you need to change it. So, and you're not blindly following these links. There's another version of it. This one just happens to be a financial institute. So again, this is coming from a bank saying it wants you to verify money from a withdrawal from another country. Please click on this link to do that. Again, if this is not something that you are expecting or you just initiated, never click on that link. If you're a trusted bank customer, open up a brand new browser. In this case, go to trustedbank.com by typing it in yourself. Log in with your credentials because you got the right site. If this is real, somewhere in your message system there, it's going to give you the same information. If you don't do that and you click on this link, again, they're going to be stealing your bank credentials in this case, because that's what they're after. So here's another example. This one here is a little different. So these type of phishing emails usually pretend to be someone internally, and they go after, in this case, most of the time they go after HR, someone in HR or payroll. In this case, it's someone pretending to be an internal employee, and they're reaching out to somebody in payroll saying, hey, I want you to open or update my direct deposit information. Here's my new account information, and can you do that for this payroll? If you don't have the proper procedures and policies in place as a company, and you blindly follow this email without verifying that it's really the person doing that, you're going to end up sending someone's payroll to a drop account that was probably opened with fake credentials. And the minute the money hits that account, they get notified of it and they close the account out and are all gone with the wind. And the company's out a payroll because they realized they sent it to somebody that wasn't the employee because they blindly follow this email. It's something that you definitely need to have in place, that never in any type of financial transaction ever just blindly follow an email request ever. You always need to verify either in writing with the person physically in front of you that this is valid, or you need to call them on a known number, not one that they give you in an email conversation. Call them at a known number that you can verify that it's actually this person making that request, or you can do both. A lot of our clients tend to have written things where you got to physically fill out a paper with them standing in front of you, signature, so you have it verified for any type of direct deposit information or any type of financial request for that matter. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here just in a second. So whaling is another version of phishing. As you can probably guess, whaling goes after the big fish, obviously. It's either pretending to be the CE level person and trying to target somebody that usually works underneath that C level entity here. So basically, in this case here, it's someone trying to pretend to be the CFO. They're reaching out to somebody that obviously works underneath the CFO. And in this case, they're saying, hey, are you busy? I need you to process a wire transfer for me today. Another tactic is, hey, I need you to go buy me some gift cards or Amazon cards or eBay cards or Home Depot cards or whatever. That's a tactic that they use. If you blindly follow this, you're going to be sending money to somebody that isn't the CFO. So you need to make sure that you get any type of financial request, never blindly follow that with just an email thing. You need to get on the phone and physically verify. In this case, you're going to call Roger. Sean's going to call Roger on a known number that is on record, not one that is sent here, in the text or in this email, because then you've got the real person. Because that's the other thing that the bad guys do. They sometimes put phone numbers here, and then they'll communicate with you pretending to be Roger. Or they might text you. That's another thing too. So it's just, you got to verify that this type of requests are valid. And the only way to do that is either in person or via phone, that at a known number. So that's another thing. The other way to avoid some of this too, and this is a very easy solution, is that we recommend to all our clients, especially if you're a Microsoft client, to enable external banners. So what that does is that adds on every external email coming from the outside into your organization, it's going to have one of these banners on it in yellow. Sometimes they're pink, depending on what color scheme it is. This just happens to be yellow. And it basically says, look, this email is coming from the outside of your organization. Do not click on any links and do not open any attachments unless you recognize the sender. What does this do? It does two things. One, it makes you aware that it's coming from the outside. Two, in the event that someone is pretending to be an inside person, in this case, the Sean, or on the other one might be this one here, where they're pretending to be an internal employee. If you see one of these messages come through and it has that external banner on it, that is a huge red flag that it is not the person that they say they are. Because if this was really an internal person, it would route inside your organization. It would never be coming from the outside in. It would route internally in your email system, and it wouldn't have that banner. So if you have someone that says they're an employee, or someone that is saying that they're your CFO or your CEO or whatever, and it has one of these banners, that is a huge red flag for you. And it's a visual way. That's why we recommend doing this, because even on cell phones, this makes it real easy to see that, because that's the other thing. A lot of people check their emails on cell phones, and it's hard to tell. You can't look at the email address sometimes and see that way and things like that. So this is a very easy visual way of determining whether it's coming from the inside or outside. So the bad guys realize that people are getting smarter now. So what they've done, they've realized that, hey, some of our simple phishing things aren't working quite the way they used to work. So we got to change things up and come up with new tactics and stuff. So what are they doing? They're coming up with this. This is called consent phishing. And what this does is this will pop a application request. In this case, it's asking for permission. So maybe it's on a site or something, and then all of a sudden you get one of these pop-ups that look like this window here. It says, hey, we're asking for permissions, and you either hit cancel or accept here. And if you're not careful and you blindly hit accept here without looking at this very carefully, or maybe you don't even realize what this is, what you're doing here is basically allowing this application to access everything in your Microsoft world. What I mean by that is your email, your calendar, your contacts, any files that you might have saved up there, any files you might have saved on SharePoint. It can send mail as you. It can read mail as you. It can do everything as you. And this is all without the bad guy having your password or login. You're basically giving this application full permission to do everything as you, as if it was you. And if you're using multi-factor, and we'll get to that later, this also bypasses that too. So if you blindly hit accept here on this, and this is a malicious application, and in this case, this one is, you are basically giving the bad guys keys to your entire Microsoft ecosystem. So you definitely want to be very, very careful about these type of windows and just blindly following these things. Ultimately, you probably shouldn't get these very often, and if you do, and you're a client of ours, please reach out to us before you click on anything. You can reach out to our support desk very, very quickly. We can just jump into your machine and look at it remotely. We'll be happy to do that for you, and let you know whether it's a decent, whether it's valid or not. But in rare cases, you should not be getting these. So just be aware that they are doing this. So don't go blindly clicking accept on those type of things. The other thing that they're doing too is called quishing, and this is basically using the QR codes, which are these little fancy barcode things here. Basically, they're just sending people barcodes. They scan them with their phone, and it sends them to a website. And sometimes it asks for login. Sometimes, and the problem with these is they don't really show you where you're going because the URLs are shortened. You don't know if it's legitimate or not. And it's real easy to trick people into scanning these things. Obviously a lot of restaurants have gone to touchless menus because of the COVID thing. So they use these on their tabletops for the menus. If I was a malicious guy and I happen to be doing this locally, I could drop one of these on any restaurant, even if they're not using that, and people will scan it thinking it's a menu, and it might not be. It could be a virus that's going onto their phone, and they won't even realize it until later on because they're scanning these things blindly. So just be aware that, I understand the point behind these things, but they could be potentially used in malicious ways. So you've got to be careful of what you're scanning with your phone. With that, we'll move on to the next topic here, and that is USB and mobile devices. And USB are the little USB flash drives that sometimes people use. If you ever happen to find one of those laying around on the ground or laying on a desk or something, and you are not sure where that, who owns that or what is on that, please do not just blindly put that into your machine. There is automated ways of infecting machines by all you got to do is plug it in, and it will automatically run something and install a piece of software on that machine that will allow a bad guy in from the outside. So if find these, sometimes bad guys will drop these in parking lots and in front of buildings and things like that, and everybody's curious as to what's on them. They can label them saying confidential, and all that just makes it even more impelling to plug in to see what's on this because people are curious. So it's definitely easy to do and get people to fall for this. I'm telling you not to fall for it because it could end up leading you into a potentially nightmare situation where you don't realize people are coming in from the outside because you plug that in. So if you do happen to use these for transferring maybe photos or something, I know sometimes architects, with the large CAD files and stuff, sometimes use these to bring prints and stuff or photos and drawings and stuff in to offices. You want to make sure that you're doing virus scans on both sides, one where it's coming from and one where it's going. So you're not so potentially nothing's hitchhiking itself onto that USB key. So that's just something to be aware of. The other thing I want to make sure everyone's aware of too is that, pretty much everybody has a smartphone nowadays, and everybody probably realizes, one, they're not very efficient on battery utilization a lot of times. So you have to charge these things fairly frequently. A lot of times people will just bring their charging cord, take it, and then plug it into their desktop or their laptop, because usually it's a USB cord and it will charge off of one of those devices. I highly recommend you don't do that for a variety of reasons. But the first major one is that while that does charge these devices, what you may not realize is it also turns one of these into a USB flash drive too. So it opens up a data channel as well, unless you have a specific cable that blocks that. But all of the cables, most of them have data capability too, which means that not only will it charge this, it also turns this into a USB device. So if there's something on this phone that is waiting to get plugged into a Windows network or a specific network, there could be something malicious on this that's going to end up passing through into the PC that you're plugging it into. What I recommend is using your wall brick that plugs into the wall, and use the electrical outlet to charge your phones, and not your physical laptop or your desktop or whatever that is. The other thing too is you want to be careful of public charging stations. Those are the ones that might be out and about at airports, maybe hotel lobbies. Some malls have them too. Some convenience stores might have them as well. Again, the reason why is because if it's a malicious charging station, one that is set up by a bad guy to make it look like it's there for public use, but they could be stealing information off of anybody that's plugging into them. Because again, you plug that in, this is now a USB device. So now that malicious public charging station is potentially pulling off all your contacts. It could be pulling off your phone, your files, your photos. It could be doing all that stuff. So be very, very cautious of using public charging stations. What I recommend, again, is your wall brick, especially if you're traveling. I mean, some of the smaller ones are allowed on planes. You can just put it in your carry-on, and there's no problem with that now. So just use that, because at least you're using a valid source, not a potentially malicious one. So that leads us on to passwords. So what do we recommend from a password side of things? So we recommend complex, secure, and unique passwords. So what does that mean? Well, the unique part means that you have a different password for every site that you log into. That's unique. What is complex? Complex is, I recommend 10 characters at a minimum. We'll show you why here in a second. 10 characters at minimum. And out of those 10 characters, at least one of those has to be a special character. Special characters like an @ sign, a $sign, a pound sign, punctuation, something like that. At least one uppercase letter and at least one number. So that 10-character password has to have all three of at least one of those in there. So everybody's probably saying, okay, you want me to remember 10-character passwords that are all these fancy characters and all this stuff, and it's got to be unique for every site I go on to? Yeah, right. Okay. Are you kidding me? That's why people use easy passwords. That's why people use the same password. And we're going to show you how to avoid that pitfall. So what can we do to remember all these unique passwords? There's a couple things. First of all, you can use online password managers. There's a bunch of them out there. They're commercial. I personally am not a fan of them. Reason being is that, first of all, the bad guys know that they hold passwords, and they're huge targets for the bad guys. And in fact, out of the 5 big ones, 3 of them have been breached already out of the big 5, and one of them has been breached 3 times now. So you can tell that they are huge targets for the bad guys to go after. So I personally don't do that. I personally keep my passwords on my person. I actually store them in a way, I actually store them on a USB key. So that USB key is encrypted, which means that in order to get access to anything that's on that, I have to put in one password. That password is very long. I memorized that password. And then on that is a listing of all my other passwords. However, if someone got access to that and somehow ended up getting past the password to unlock that, even if they look at what all those passwords are not going to work because they're not recorded in their entirety. And I'm going to explain what that means. I have them stored in a secure way. So how do I do that? There's a couple of different ways you can do that. And you can do this either on a USB, you can do this in a spreadsheet, you can do this, you can actually do this on a piece of paper. Not that I recommend that, but you could do this on a piece of paper. And basically what it is you are recording your passwords in a way that you're not recording the entire or the true password. So how do you do that? You can use missing characters. So in your password, let's say you're using a 10-digit password. On your password sheet, you may only be recording 7 of those 10 passwords, or those 10 digits of that password. And all those missing characters are the same. You know what those missing characters are. You memorize them because they're all the same. So when you go down through that list, the bad guys are going to see 7 characters there. They're going to try that 7 characters, and it's not going to work because there's 3 missing characters. You can also change the position of those missing characters. You can do them all at the beginning, all at the end. You can some at the beginning, some at the end. You know the missing characters. You also know the position or how they're missing. Only you know that. So anybody that comes across that list is going to try those passwords, and none of them are going to work, and they're going to think it's an old list, even though you know what the missing pieces are. So it's a way of recording your passwords without physically recording them. The other way is with extra characters. Now this one is a little more difficult because with extra characters, unlike the one above with missing ones, you can't use the same characters that you're adding to your password. So what I mean by that is, again, we'll go to the 10-character password. In this case, on your password list, you're going to be adding 3 extra characters in whatever position and whatever those characters are. Obviously, you know the position of what they are. So you'll have 13 characters on your password list where only 10 are the real password. If you use the same characters that you're adding, there's software out there that I can take that list and enter that list into, and it will pick up the pattern of those added characters because they're all the same, and I will peel those off and try what's left. So you have to mix the characters up, and you can see at the bottom here, example, obviously I'm spelling in between here, I'm spelling password. I added 2 characters at the beginning and 1 character at the end. And you can see in my second password, I used different characters at the beginning, different character at the end. As long as you record them with different characters, that software is worthless at that point. So that's the one thing you got to do about adding extra characters, where with the missing characters, they don't know they're missing in the first place, so you don't need to worry about mixing them up. So just something to be aware of, that you can record them without physically recording the actual passwords there. And here's why we recommend that. So right now in 2022, we used to recommend 9 at one point. In fact, that was just at the beginning of this year. We used to recommend 9-digit passwords, and you can see why we changed that, because I can brute force a 9-digit password in under 2 days. And what that means is every possible combination of 9-digit passwords, I can guess every single one of those in under 2 days. And you can see if you're using anything less than 9, I can guess that every single password in under a minute. 8 digits and back. Under a minute, I can guess every possible combination with the current hardware technologies that are out there and a piece of software, every possible combination in under a minute. So you can see how fast these bad guys are guessing passwords. So if you're using a password that is less than 9, you could be in for some trouble if they happen to guess it. So we recommend 10. Obviously at 10, it takes 5 months. Now, there's always a chance they get it right out of the gate. Again, it's just random. They try every possible combination, and they could get it within the first try, potentially. It's just luck of the draw. But to get through every possible combination, it's going to take 5 months right now. By beginning of next year, this is probably going to change again because the hardware keeps getting faster, and that's what changes this number. So the faster the hardware gets, the better the hardware gets, the easier it is to crack these passwords. So if you really want to be careful or really want to be secure, you might want to take it up to 13, 14 characters. And you can see right now we're up into the 16 million years to guess every possible combination. But you can see how it actually increases with complexity and the time it goes there. So this is why we recommend at least 10 characters. So we did mention just a little bit about multi-factor. So that's actually what it is. It's called two-factor as well. It's based on the concept of something you know and something you have. So the something you know is your username and your password. The something you have is usually a cell phone. It usually integrates with your cell phone. And when you log in with your username and password, it's going to prompt you in a couple different ways. It might say, hey, give me the 6-digit code that's on your cell phone. So that's the something you have part. So you basically type that in and then it'll let you log in. The idea is that if your credentials are stolen, the bad guys won't have your phone and they won't be able to get in. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Excuse me. It could actually do a push too. And we'll talk about that here in a second. If you're not using multi-factor, I highly recommend you enable it. It's not 100% foolproof, but it does stop about 90% of the hacker attempts out there. And I'll explain to you why here in a second. So one of the ways that the bad guys are getting around this is it's called something called MFA fatigue. And what it is that basically this leverages the fact that your credentials are already compromised, so they already know your username and your password. What they're trying to do is to get you to let them pass the multi-factor piece. And what they do is they hope that you're using the push method. And basically what it is they're asking you to, hey, is this you logging in? Hey, is this you logging in? They constantly just keep hitting you time after time after time after time after time after time after time. And you basically get sick of it and you just hit approve because you think something's wrong and you just want it to stop. That's what they want you to do. If you're constantly getting, those type of requests, if you're our client, call us because you probably have your credentials compromised, or if you have an internal IT staff, make sure you bring it to their attention, because the whole idea is to get you to click on that because you're tired of getting those requests and stuff. So it's just something to be aware of, that you want to make sure that you don't inadvertently just let them in by hitting that accept point. Now there are ways to get around this, and it's basically setting limits up to how many of those can go out at a time, and that kind of stops this as well. But that's more on the configuration side of the back end. If you are getting these, please bring it up to your IT, whether it's us or internal. That way they can kind of investigate what's going on and see if it's a potential issue with this or not. So with that, wrapping up here, obviously from a cybersecurity side of things, just some reminders, only collect the data that you need. What that means is that in the event of a breach, if you're only regulated to hold on to 3 years worth of data or 5 years worth of data or 7 years worth of data, don't hold your entire company history online, because in a breach event, you are responsible regardless of what the guidelines say. If you have that data available, that is what you are responsible for. So if you have your whole entire company history online and you have a breach, you will be liable for the entire data stack that you have. So you want to, anything that you're not compliance related to, you want to get that offline. That way you're only up to the compliance window. Most companies are 7 or 5 years. At that point, you want to archive the old stuff offline. That way, the breach is only contained to that compliance side of things. You also want to limit access to your systems with sensitive data. Make sure you're obviously all of your systems are password protected. I would even recommend that in your home from a personal level. Don't use auto logins and that stuff. It just makes it much easier for the bad guys to bypass that stuff when it's not necessarily needed to log in. Make sure that your personal devices are secure. Firewalls and networks, make sure that they're set up and tested frequently to make sure that there's no potential holes or gaps in those that could potentially allow the bad guys to come in. Anybody that gets terminated or happens to quit, you also want to make sure that you're disabling the accounts of those former employees. A while back at the beginning of the year, that pipeline hack that happened, that was actually the bad guys actually used a former employee's account to do that. If they would have followed this guideline, that hack wouldn't have ever happened because that account would have been disabled. So unfortunately, it never got disabled and was utilized in that hack that happened with the pipeline hack. So, and then again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the saving grace is make sure that your data is backed up, because in the event you do get encrypted by ransomware or some way, shape, or form, that is your saving grace. And you want that backup offline or in the cloud. So because that's the first thing the bad guys go after is the backup, because they know that that's your saving grace. So they try to get rid of those so if you're using USB drives or something like that, that is not the most secure way to do it, because they can easily delete those devices because they're connected to the computers or servers or whatever they're backing up. So just be aware of that. You want to make sure that they are unplugged daily after the backup. So with that, hopefully that you're better equipped to figure out what the hackers are doing out there, and hopefully this was helpful here. Let's see here. Let's see. We do have. I do see something here in the chat. Okay, it says, besides the fatigue tactic, this is from Jamie, I've also seen scammers attempt to get around two-factor by claiming that they need to verify the identity, asking for individual's phone or email, and then the scammer sending a password reset. Yes. So that is another thing, the texting thing. What they do is they try to communicate with you and try to get you to click on a link where it either disables the MFA that is on your physical device and transfers it over to them. The other tactic too is they actually go to the cell provider and they do SIM swapping, and basically what that does is they actually get another cell card activated with your number and actually plug that into their phone. So not only are you getting the notifications, so are they. So you want to make sure that you have proper things in place that try to avoid that. At your cell phone provider. I know I'm a Verizon customer. They have some stopgaps that potentially help with that. Again, nothing is 100% foolproof, but make sure that you're definitely trying to avoid some of those tactics and things. Good question there, Jamie. Good point. So with that said, that's pretty much all I have here. If you guys do have any questions, I don't see any other questions here. But if you do have any other further questions after the presentation, feel free to email us here at info@pcatg.com. The other thing too I want to throw out there is we do have some podcasts out there that go a little deeper into some of this stuff, like social media and wireless networks and things like that we don't cover on here, but it covers a much more deeper aspect of that. And their audio sessions are about 15-20 minutes tops. Something that not only from a business side you might want to listen to, from a personal side too. It's very eye-opening and might make you think twice about what you're posting on Facebook about not only you but your kids too. So just be aware of that. There's some more additional stuff out there, and we have these on a monthly basis. One thing to keep in mind is that while some of these presentations do have repetitive information in them, I update these all the time because the bad guys are constantly changing things up. So I constantly update these presentations to let everybody know what's going on out there and what the current tactics are. So it is useful that maybe every 2-3 months you could join these and check them out. So just throw that out there. And again, here at the bottom, if you are looking for a potential free security assessment, you can also contact us here at the info section. So I don't see any other questions. I want to thank everybody for their time today and hope you have the rest of the day is enjoyable for you. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.